This is it, folks. The big final day of our spooky game recommendations, and of course, I can't go out without mentioning at least one Resident Evil game. This franchise has been called the king of horror games, and I remember when I was growing up, every kid I knew was talking about how amazing they were. Granted, I was a big scaredy baby when I was a kid, and some would argue that I still am to this day, so I didn't play any of them, but when I finally got my courage up, and finally got the nerve to pick one up and play it, I discovered the most horrifying gameplay device of all time. Tank controls. I seriously, not kidding you, could not move beyond the very first zombie. It kept killing me over and over again because I could not figure out how to move in this game. Post all the Aaron you suck comments down below. Believe me, I am well aware. So for years, the Resident Evil franchise was my white whale. I slowly learned that I really enjoyed horror games, and yet the most famous horror franchise of them all was inaccessible to me. But when Resident Evil 4 came out and everyone was giving it perfect scores, I decided, you know what? Screw it. I'm going to force myself to learn these controls, only to pick the game up and learn, dear God, they fixed them. They created a brand new over-the-shoulder gameplay experience that modernized the tank controls in a way that made them easy to understand. Finally, I could dive into this franchise, and I was won over almost immediately. The mission of this game is simple. You're Leon Kennedy, the rookie cop from Resident Evil 2, except now you're a badass. In fact, I was playing this game back in college with a buddy of mine who knew the franchise, and when he saw Leon, those were his exact words. So talk about character progression. But he has to go to a small European village to find the kidnapped daughter of the President of the United States. From there, you uncover that the villagers are not too friendly. In fact, they range from unwelcoming to chainsaw-wielding lunatics. Yeah, and that guy is the town's doctor. That gives you an idea of how screwed up this place is. But this was an amazing step forward for not just the RE franchise, but for horror games in general. Many people, including myself, complain about all the action in horror games today, about how overpowered your main heroes are. And Resident Evil 4 was one of the first games to ever amp up the action element in a horror game, but they found just the right balance for it. Yes, you could now jump out of windows and roll to safety, and ammo was plentiful, and you could actually finally hurt people with your knife. What a weird concept. However, that doesn't mean that they had to get rid of the horror aspects. Resident Evil 4 to me is one of those few games that balance horror and action perfectly, so yes, you can still fight back, but you're still scared about what will happen next. And the improvements to the design and the variety of the monsters was stunning. Just starting with the basic zombies themselves. As I said, I first played this with a group of friends, one of whom was a big Resident Evil expert, and when he first saw one of the zombies dodge your bullet, he jumped like the game had just come to life. He could not believe the idea of a zombie in a game that didn't just stand there and take all your abuse. And it's impossible for me to talk about this game without bringing up the regenerators. The way they walked, the way they would burst to life and attack when you got close, and most of all, the sound. Dear God, the sound of them struggling to breathe haunted me while I played this game, and still to this day. I'm not kidding you. The sound of them struggling to gasp as they slowly scuttled forth sounded so much like the old air conditioning system I had when I played this game for the first time, that when it used to kick on in the middle of the night, I would wake up and pull the covers over my head. Again, not joking. And I know over the years people have come to complain about the forced escort missions in this game. And hey, I understand, people hate escort missions. I know I do. But ladies and gentlemen, let me take you back to what gaming was like in the early 2000s. Compared to what escort missions used to be like, Ashley Graham was the smartest, capable companion gamers had ever seen. She could hide so you didn't have to take her into battle. She would know to duck when you were firing at someone behind her. She would try to stand behind you when possible to get out of harm's way. She could even shove zombies off of her so you didn't always have to come and rescue her. Again, I know that these days we have partners in games who throw items at you and create objects out of thin air, but at the time, this was revolutionary. An escort mission where your partner wasn't just an incompetent oaf who kept dying non-stop. Now, I will admit that since this game came out, other games have done escort missions better, and other games have also smoothed out the over-the-shoulder controls that make them even more accessible, and sure, you can even look back at this game and blame it for, well, this. Although I'd say the movie franchise is more to blame than this ever was. But even with all that, nothing will take away how amazing of an experience playing this game for the first time was. Nothing will ever be able to wipe away the memory of how incredible this game looked and how amazing the sounds were. I mentioned before in previous videos, but for horror games, the audio is oftentimes the most important element, and this game captured that beautifully. Every single shout from a zombie, every single scuttering insect sound, it all made me jump every single time. And because of all that, this game has had a bigger impact on my love of horror games than any I've ever played. So thank you all very much for joining us for all 6 of these spooky game recommendations. After today, the channel will be returning to its normal schedule, but remember, we still love to geek out about games, comics, and movies every single week here. So if you want to see what we do the rest of the year, then hit that subscribe button and follow me on Twitter and Tumblr at Professor Thorgy. Thanks again for watching, everyone, and happy Halloween.